everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. And Joel, we have started the recording, so whenever you want to get started, you can go ahead.
Okay, excellent. All right, thanks, Ellie. So I'm Joel Peterson with the CM Group, and today I'm going to show you Solver reporting. Solver is a web-based reporting solution that is deployed via the cloud. There is a on-site version or on-premise version that I'm not going to show. Everything that I show you in the cloud version is available in on-premise, but today I'm just going to focus on cloud. And Solver is, as I said, a web-based reporting application, but everything that's built, all the building blocks of the reports are all done natively in Excel. Everything that I show you from a report or a budget firm standpoint will be built in Excel. So it's going to be familiar tools that most people use on a regular basis. To start with, we have our home screen. This is just a landing page. So you simply browse to a website. This is a landing page. It gets some links to certain things that I'm going to show later. For example, the support portal and the Solver Academy. It's broken down into essentially two sections. We've got a reporting section, and then we have our planning section. I'm going to start out with reporting, and then we'll talk about planning. I'll talk about some of the other tools that are specific to BC, and then I'm also going to cover kind of the end version of things. After we produce financial reports, I want to demonstrate how those things then flow into analytical tools such as Power BI. So I'm going to start out with report templates. So report templates are our financial reports. Could be financial statements. It could be subledger reports, so accounts payable, accounts receivable, inventory types of reports. Natively out of the box, when we install Solver, it works with BC with a general ledger level, but we can deploy multiple modules. Any module that you're using in BC would be available to you in Solver. It just depends on what we deploy. But natively out of the box, it has general ledger functionality. So this is what our report templates looks like. We categorize things into various types of reports. And these categories they're basically function the way that a network share drive would, where maybe, we have folders out there where we produce financial reports and then we grant people access to those folders. Maybe we make them read only. And so that's basically what these categories are doing. It's just a way to organize reports, because now with it being on the web, we don't have a network folder that we're saving documents into. It's just all located within here. So the categories are how we organize our reports. All of the reports are shown as previews. There's also a list view, so you can see all of the reports, in more of a detailed list. When we click on any category, it's just filtering the reports. So these are all the reports that are in my environment here. But if I click on a category, it's filtering it so that I'm only seeing the reports that are part of that category. And myself as the administrator, I am seeing all reports, but typically people would only see the reports that they specifically have access to in these categories. One of the themes that you'll find with Solver is you'll see a theme of trying to organize your process. So as it relates to reporting, we want to organize your month-end close process. We want to organize your reports in a way that is in the order in which you have to produce things in order to get to your end game, which is your monthly financial statements or executive packets, or however you classify them. And so that's kind of how you'll see things organized in the category section here. So we'll kind of jump right into some of these reports. We might start out with control reports. So maybe it's just a trial balance report. If I look at it in this list view, I can simply run a report. If I look at it in the card view, as I said, you'll see a preview of it, and you can just click on it to run it. When you open a report, it will automatically run the report using the last categories or parameters that you ran the report for. So this is user specific. So if the last time I ran this report, I chose a certain entity, and this entity would be like my individual BC companies. And if I selected a specific period, it will automatically rerun that report using whatever parameters that I selected the last time. So you'll see that this has an Excel look and feel. That's because this is built in Excel. So you'll see that you have the grouping. It's a data grouping. It's just a native function of Excel. So this trial balance example here, this is actually more of a P&L style trial balance, but We've got our typical P&L format, but you'll see that it's kind of in summary, where we're looking at our departmental expenses based on categories of expenses, and then using native Excel data grouping, we can expand on that and see the detail lines that make up that one summary line. Okay, this is just a fairly simple example. Let me go back and open up some financial reports. So these reports that I'm showing you are reports that are available as part of what we call our Quick Start package. So when you subscribe to Solver, there's something called a starter pack that's related to BC. So it basically includes the integrations to BC, and it also includes a marketplace of reports that are ready to go on day one. And the concept behind this quick start methodology for Solver is that once your web tenant is procured, you can produce content on day one. And so there are some pre-built reports out here that work natively out of the box. And so some of the reports that I'm showing you are part of that content pack that comes with BC. So let's look at just a simple balance sheet, for example. Again, I can click on it and run it. I can rerun it by selecting different parameters. As I said, it will automatically run the report based on the last parameters that I ran before, but I can change these. The idea is that I want to have dynamic reports that live and breathe with my system. So I don't want to have to create a different balance sheet per company. I want one balance sheet that works across the board, just like we see with FRX or Management Reporter. So if I wanted to run this for a different entity, I would just select a different parameter and then select a different company and rerun the report, and just by hitting the run button. Again, just a fairly simple balance sheet. One of the things that I always do when I show Solver is I like to open up a report in design mode so you can see a little bit under the hood, because oftentimes we'll hear, well, yeah, it looks great, but what do I have to do to actually make this happen? I'm going to open this up in design mode, but first I want to mention some of the things that we can do here within viewing this report. I can export this report, so I can export it directly to Excel to do further analytics or combine it with other data. I can export it to a PDF, and these are multi-tab reports, so you can create reports that have multiple worksheets within an Excel workbook, and each tab becomes a separate bookmark within the PDF. I have some other information. I can, if I'm a designer, I can open this report in Report Designer, which is the Excel version of it. So I'm going to go ahead and open this in Excel, just so you can see what it looks like under the hood. This will take us a moment to launch. Okay, so this is what a report looks like in design mode. You'll see that when we're running the report, it's got several dozen lines to it. But when we look at this report in design mode, we'll see that there's only actually a couple of sections that aren't headers. You see this assets, current assets, total, property, plant, equipment. These headers are just text. They're just hand typed in text. There's actually only a few reporting components to this. We're basically saying these are for this line, we want to restrict this to assets, current assets. For this line, we want to restrict it to property, plant, equipment, and then current liabilities, long-term liabilities, and things like that. So basically, this is a drag and drop reporting system. If I look at general ledger up here in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see all of my dimensions, whether it's an account or a dimension within BC. I've got things like period. What period do I want to run the report for? Entity, which would be my individual BC companies. Any dimensions that I have within BC, such as department or location or region, any dimensional data that you have in BC is brought over. And so it's really just a matter of dragging fields over that we want in this report. So I'm not going to get into a lot of details about designing reports, but I do want to just briefly show you that it may appear when you look at a report, a finished report, that there's a lot of work that goes on to actually make that happen in Excel. It's actually rather simple, and there's only a handful of actual report components in this report. What I tell people is that your ability to create content in Solver is directly related to your Excel ability. So if you're an intermediate Excel user or above, you should have no problem producing content in Solver. If you're below intermediate, you may want to get some additional Excel training as well. But this is 95% Excel as far as building content and probably 5% Solver. And you'll notice here in the left, all the modules that I've deployed in Solver are available. So I can build accounts payable reports, accounts receivable reports, or whatever modules I'm actually using, I can build content in one unified application. Okay, let's go back to the web. So again, just a sample balance sheet. I want to open up a P&L for the purposes of showing that in Excel, we have lots of cool features. We can do charts and graphs. We can do spark lines. We can do conditional formatting. So in this case, we're utilizing conditional formatting. Green means good, red means bad. Maybe negative variances appear in red. That's all native Excel. So it's just built-in conditional formatting in Excel. So anything that you can do in Excel, you can do in Solver when you're building your reports. There is only one exception, and that is Microsoft does not allow macros to be used in Excel online. So if you're using an online version of Excel, you can't use macro-enabled workbooks. That's the only limitation. Anything else that you can do in Excel, you can do it when you're building Solver reports. If you're referencing other worksheets, if you're charts and graphs and things like that. So this is one that has a couple of different things. It's got charts, it's got conditional formatting, it's also got data grouping. Again, just a native Excel function, just so that the idea behind using the data grouping is we want the ability to create summary and detail reports and just make it one report. Less that we have to maintain. And if we want to see the details, all we got to do is hit the plus button and we'll see the details of that. It also has full drill down capabilities. If I click into an amount field and I right mouse click, I can drill down to the summary level or to the detail level. The summary level is just going to give you a summations of the debits and the credits based on the criteria of that amount, which would be, in this case, account 48010 for department 300 for the entity of the entities that I selected at runtime. So this is a summation of the debits and credits based on those conditions. If I drill down to the detail level, I'll actually see the journal entry detail. That'd be like your account details in GP. So you have the ability to drill into both. When you run a report native in Excel, which you still have the ability to do, so I can actually run a report directly from Excel and hit the run button. I have the same functionality. I can drill down just like I could in the web, but I also have a couple of additional options here. And into my right mouse click functionality, we've added a report designer link down here. And so we can go to drill down into the summary or the detail level, or we can go directly into a pivot table. Running reports in Excel adds a little bit additional functionality. Okay, so that's a basic P&L. And then I'll show you one more just to complete the financial statement loop here, and then a statement of cash flows. Out of the box, as part of our BC Quick Start content pack, it includes all of your basic reports, your P&Ls, your balance sheets, statement of cash flows, and multiple views of each of those. So for example, we have a trending, so we're seeing the months from left to right, actual versus budget with variance. The 3 core reports, along with some kind of control reports, some of the trial balances and things like that. There's quite a bit of content that comes with the starter pack. So that, as I said, on day one, you've got content that you can work with. It's not limited to just financial statement reports either. We want to utilize the power of Excel. We can do analytics. One example of when you introduce a tool that does both reporting and budgeting, and with what's called the data warehouse. So underlying, we're taking the data from BC and we're loading it into Solver's data warehouse. And that's part of the entire software package. The data warehouse is part of that. When you introduce a data warehouse, it opens up a lot more flexibility as far as being able to do budgeting and reporting with the same tool. One example of that is I could run a P&L that is actual versus budget variance, but maybe I want people to explain the variances. So maybe I send out a P&L to my department managers or my company managers or however I organize my business. And I say, I want you to explain, variances that are, plus or minus 10%, or, and again, I can use conditional formatting to highlight and bring to their attention the things that are need to be addressed. For example, in our service revenue here in this example, we've got a negative variance year to date, actual versus budget. And so maybe I want a user to explain what that variance is. And so we can add budgeting components to any report that allows us to not only produce a report, but then get some additional subjective data related to that data that says, why did this happen? And when I record that information, it's fully reportable. So this would be the output of that. So now I'm sending a P&L to an executive manager, and here's my actual versus budget with variance, and here's the explanations for those variances. And that's just something that having a data warehouse adds that functionality to be able to do that. And very quickly, we go back to report templates. We can do full consolidation reporting. So if you have multi-company consolidation, examples out here, and again, a lot of these reports I'm showing you are available as part of the Quick Start package. We can look at our individual companies with eliminations as an example. Another consolidation report that I want to show you is we also have the ability to do trees. Similar to if you're using FRX or management reporting trees, same functionality exists here in Solver. So when running this report, I'm running a report based on a tree. And having the trees, what that does is gives me virtual rollups that don't actually exist in BC, just like using trees and Management Reporter allows me to have virtual rollups that don't exist in GP. So Asia region, for example, is not an actual entity in BC, but these two are, and same thing in Western Hemisphere and corporate US. So I create these virtual rollups and run this as a tree. And so this is a consolidated report that looks across multiple BC companies. But we've also added the additional functionality of having each node of that tree that I ran it for appear as a separate worksheet within the workbook. So I get a multi-tab report from a single tab report design. And this one is an example where we have multiple tabs. We have conditional formatting. We have the data grouping from left to right. So for example, this is a summary view of this. And I can see an year-to-date actual column. If I expand this, I can see the individual months that make up that year-to-date. And then the same thing on the budget, I can see the individual months. So again, using Excel's native data grouping, we can make detailed and summary reports together. And you can have them both top to bottom and left to right as far as using data grouping. Okay, it does handle multi-currency. I'm not going to get into that now, but we can do currency exchange calculations and actually house the currency amounts. And it also has, before I did analytics, it also has the ability to do allocations. So again, once we introduce in the budgeting module into reporting, we can actually capture if we're doing allocations, maybe it's square feet or number of employees or number of widgets sold. We can capture that information in a budget form and use that to do allocation-based reporting. Makes that whole process much more streamlined as opposed to using, say, an Excel sheet just to manually key in those numbers. We key them in once a year or once a month, once a quarter, however often you would enter those variables. And then that allows us to do, in this case, square feet allocations. So fully supports currency consolidations and allocations. And again, analytics too. So I think this is a really important component to doing Excel-based reporting. I want to show you a couple of these analytics reports. You know, we were limited with FRX and with Management Reporter to just general ledger reporting, and they're really designed to do GAAP type statements. But we can be much more creative with Solver once we introduce Excel-based reporting, and we can do some pretty cool things. For example, I'm going to open up a cash flow KPI. So this is all native Excel, just using standard Excel charting. And this is a multi-tab report. The foundation of this report is we've got a P&L trending. We've got a balance sheet, so we can combine two different reports in a single workbook. We've got a trending cash flow statement. We've got some sales data here that may come from our sales module by customer or by product line. We've got AR data that looks at what our customers owe us. We got our AP data, what we owe our vendors. And all of these things combine to give us this cash flow tree, for example. And so this is more of an Excel Sparkline type of report. And it just kind of shows us the inputs and outflows of cash, you know, coming in from revenue, taking out our cost of sales, and then our expenses, and then the obligations that we have to our vendors and what we expect to receive from our customers. And we can look at, we can build in those, you know, metrics or those ratios that are so common in accounting to kind of do a better, more graphical way of projecting cash flow. It's a fairly simplistic KPI type of a report. We can also do detailed KPIs. So if we want to see all the details that make that up instead of graphical, this is the same type of thing. We're breaking things down by revenue, by cost of sales, and looking at all of our margins, EBITDA, various ratios. And then another one that I like to show, just to give you an example of what Excel opens up the possibility of doing, is something that we call narrative reporting. So this example here is more of a newsletter type of a report. And you can see that foundationally to this report is P&L data. So you can see on tab 2, I've got a P&L report, fairly standard. In this case, it's got conditional formatting, but I'm using icons instead of highlighting cells. And essentially what this is it has a narrative surrounding that P&L. If I look at profitability up at the top, the profitability for this month was great. Okay, what defines great? Here's what my net profits were. Here's what they were last period. This is an improvement. Well, what means improvement? Foundation of all of this is actually, as I said, just a P&L. But when I come down to the bottom, usually this section would be hidden, but these are business rules. We're defining what is great. We're defining what needs improvement. We're defining what is an increase or what is weak. And so all of this is just part of a standard Excel file, bringing in data the way we would in any other report, but we're creating these business rules down at the bottom in this hidden section to automatically create this narrative or this newsletter type of it could be a cover page, or it could be something goes to a board or anything else. So not the most common thing in the world to use this, but I show this one because it kind of opens up the possibilities of how creative we can be once we introduce Excel-based reporting. We're not limited to just rows and columns like we are in other financial statement reporting tools. There's all kinds of other examples out here as well. It does connect to, like I said, out of the box, it connects to GL summary and GL detail, but you have the option of rolling out additional modules. So if you want to do AP reporting and do your trial balances or vendor analytics, same thing on the customer side. We can deploy HR modules if that's something that's important to you. And it can also serve as a tool to do reporting on other enterprise systems that you may have. Solver wants to be your one-stop reporting source, not just for Business Central, but if you have other enterprise applications, if we can get the data into the data warehouse by creating connections, and the data warehouse for Solver is SQL. It's on the Microsoft Azure network, just as BC is. If you have data that we can get into a database through integrations or through imports, Solver can be the reporting tool for that. And we link to lots of different things. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. I just bring that up to point out that we're not just limited to reporting on BC data. Now, before I move on to the next section, one of the things that I want to show you is the marketplace. And you can visit this now anytime that you want. If you go to the Solver Global homepage, and I'll just show it to you anyway. So while we're on the solverglobal.com homepage, if you go to Solutions and you go down here to Template Marketplace, these are all of the reports that are available to you. And it talks more about the quick start that I mentioned, all of the out-of-the-box reports that you get as part of the BC connector. And you can look at each of these reports. So if I wanted to look at the balance sheet report, for example, again, this is just an image of it, but all of these reports that I'm showing you are available to download directly from Solver from your landing page as part of the BC Quick Start tools. Now, one of the advantages of having all of these pre-configured reports, these may not be, exactly the way that you currently do your financial statements, but it serves as a really good tool. Number one, it can get you running reports on day one. So as you're implementing BC, for example, you can do reconciliations, make sure everything is reconciling to GP as you're rolling out BC from GP. So you can get data on day one. But I think one of the most important features of having this marketplace and all these sample reports is, one, it gives you lots of ideas of other things that you can do just besides your standard financial statements that we would typically do in Management Reporter. Two, I think they serve as a really important tool for you to be able to reverse engineer reports. So for many people, you're going to get trained on how to build reports in Solver. And we're going to help you develop the content that you need to produce as part of your month-end close process. But you're going to want to be able to create your own content. And so one of the best ways that we find to be able to create your own content is to open up reports that have already been built and say, okay, well, how did they handle that one situation? Or how do I create the expanding columns from left to right? Or how do I do the data grouping? Between all of these examples, pretty much any of the functionality that you would have using Excel-based reporting, there's examples out here that you can use as a foundation to help you build your own content. Or you can take what's available in all of these and just modify it, put your logos on it, change the verbiage, the way that you call things. Some people might call it sales, some might call it revenues. And so we can just modify these reports to meet your needs. Okay, so that's reporting as an overview. There's a couple other components to reporting. So what I just showed you is called live reporting. And this is a specific type of license that is part of Solver's BC environment. Under report templates, that's what we call live reporting. So you notice that when I ran a report, I can select parameters. I can select the company or department that I want to run it for, and I can select a date. I can hit the run button and generate a report. So that's one type of reporting license. We also have another type of reporting license called Report Archives. And essentially what Report Archives is it's a different type of user. They're much less expensive than full reporting users. And essentially what these are static reports. So these are sent to archive users. They open up their report. They can see it the same way that we saw it just in report templates, but you notice that we don't have the parameters to select from. So this is basically a pre-run report that somebody has run for an archive user. They still have the ability to drill down. They can export it to Excel. They can download it to Excel. They can download it to a PDF, and they can drill down into it. And they still have things like data grouping, but this is a pre-run report. So they're not actually selecting the parameters and running this. Somebody else is running it for them. It's a lower cost license, and this would be designed for people who don't necessarily need to run reports, but they need to get content. And even things like a CPA firm is a great example where we could designate an archive license for a bank or a CPA firm, and they could, maybe your CPA firm could download your trial balance on a monthly basis, depending on what they're doing for you, without taking up a full license and without somebody actually generating reports and sending them to them. Finally, as it relates to reporting, we've got something called Publisher. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but essentially what Publisher is a scheduled job. So the idea behind Publisher is I can create a job. It could be weekly, could be daily, could be monthly. And essentially what it does is I select a group of reports that I want to be part of a job. I select so in this case, I've got 3 reports. I select the parameters for that report, what company, what date. I select the recipients for that report, and I set a schedule for how often they're going to get it. But in addition, I can also choose how they get it. So I can send it to an archive if they are an archive user, or I can have reports sent to them via email, and they would get just a published Excel file. This is static XLSX file. The idea behind Publisher is once you've got all of your financial statements and your reporting packets exactly the way that you want them, Publisher allows you to automate the generation and distribution of those reports and send them out to whoever gets them, however they want to get them. So this is something that would typically come at the tail end of a reporting implementation, where we want to automate sending them out each reporting period. Okay, so we're about halfway through, and that is reporting. A second component to Solver is planning, and planning is essentially just budgeting. And we handle that through something called input templates. Now, The reports that I showed you were all built in Excel. A budgeting form is simply just a report or designated certain fields in that report to be write back fields for budgeting. So these are the details that write back to the data warehouse. You do not have to load your budgets into BC. You can bring them directly into Solver. If they did go into BC, they would automatically come into Solver anyway. But with BC, just like with GP, we have the ability to create a general ledger budget, which is basically just by account, by period. And so just general ledger reporting only. But with using budgeting in Solver, it opens up a lot more functionality. So we'll start out, again, the theme behind it is organizing your process. So if we look at our annual budget forms, for example, start out with a process. And a process is just organizing the process. These are all the steps that I need to complete my budget for the year or for the quarter, however often I do it. So this is what we're doing. This is what templates, what forms we're actually using, who's responsible for it, and the ones that do. So we're, again, just trying to organize that process. The next thing that we might do is some of the foundational things. Prep work, for example. So prep work might be things like the assumptions, the annual assumptions. What is my FICA, FUTA, and SUTA rates for the year? What's my workers' comp rate? How much are my benefits? Maybe it's a monthly amount. Maybe it's a broken down by, benefit type. Days per month could be, pretty much anything that you're doing that are kind of global assumptions that aren't necessarily related to a specific company or department. But these things drive other things in our budgeting process. Okay. And so we've got some basic forms out here that I'm going to run through. But one of the things I want to show you first is what I think is a very powerful feature in this budgeting tool is something that we don't see very often, and that's budget accuracy analysis. So most of our clients go through a month or a year-end budgeting process so they can, have a foundation for what they think they're going to do for the year. But what we find is that we don't often go back and see how good we are at it. And so this is actually not a budget form. This is a report. But what it does is for this particular company, US, which is corporate US, for a specific budget, so we can have lots of different budgets. How did we do, from a variance standpoint? How did we do in administration, or how did we do in professional services? You can see in 2019, our budget variance was down 2%. 2020, it got worse. And then 2021 got a little bit better. And then we've got our average 3-year. And you can see that, for most of these, we didn't meet our variances. We didn't budget very well. And so using native Excel grouping, we can look at the details of this. So we look at it by account number and see what our variances are. And so in this case, administration, if we want to look at professional services, we can look at individual accounts, still have drill down capabilities as well. And then we can expand it from left to right. So here's our variances for all of 2019, all of 2020, and all of 2021. If I expand this, I can see here's what my actual was, here's what my year-to-date budget was, here's what the dollar variance and the percentage variance. So again, this is not a budget form, but it's something that we find that not a lot of people are doing is seeing how good are we at budgeting and use this as a tool to improve our budgeting process. Okay, next. If we start kind of the entire life cycle of a budget, one of the things we might want to capture is personnel. Now, this looks like a really big and complex report, but it's actually fairly simplified. Essentially, what we're doing is we've got the fields in yellow, our budget input form. So whatever I type in here, that's what's saving back to Solver. Things like their title, entire month, the end month, we know somebody's going to leave, how many hours they work, what their salary is, are they getting an increase and when? And are they getting a % increase? Are they getting a dollar increase? And are they eligible for benefits? If I hired a new person, for example, so let's say I hired a new assistant controller. It hasn't actually done anything yet. I've only put in a title, and I'll say I'm going to hire this person in March. And they're going to work the whole year, so I won't put in an end month, and I'll put in their hours. And then I'll put in a salary. And you can see after I entered a salary in, it computed all of these amounts here from left to right. This person didn't start until March. So you can see in March, it started calculating it. And essentially for this HR budget, this section here is just my input section. And then from left to right, the rest of it's just Excel formulas. So if I scroll from left to right, you'll see I've got my computed salary. I've got my total compensation, which might be my salary plus bonuses and perhaps commissions. Then I got my taxable income. It's all computed. Then you remember we had that FICA, FUTA, and SUTA rates. That's where those are being pulled in, or at least FICA and Medicare rates. Those are being computed based on the maximums that I captured in that assumptions form. I scroll over, and then we've got our FUTA, same thing. And then we've got our SUTA and our workers' comp. So that's all computed. In addition, we've got in this example, we've got our benefits. And then finally, we're actually using it to calculate headcount. So we can use this to project our headcount for the year. So that's all formula driven. What this is used for, essentially, the ultimate purpose of that is to do a GL budget. So you'll see here in this section in the middle, we're calculating at the account level each of these individual GL accounts and what the totals are for 12 periods. So while this looks like a really big form that's doing a lot of stuff, there's only really a handful of input fields and the rest of it's just Excel formulas. This example here is when we included forms as part of Quick Start. And so we typically would just have to tweak this form to do your HR budgets for the year, again, with the goal of it being a general ledger budget. That might be the start of our budget process. After that, we might look at things like travel, capital. We might do a sales budget, for example. And again, when we look at ERP systems like GP and BC, we can typically only budget at the GL account level. Having an actual budgeting tool like Solver allows us to present things to just the people who have the input and present it in a way that makes sense. So in this example, for a sales budget, maybe we're sending this out to a certain sales rep. So we've got these parameters up here for a certain sales rep. And all of my sales reps would be available to me here. And for a specific company, for a specific period, I can even break it down by customers or products. And essentially what I'm doing in this example is I'm asking people in our sales department to just give me quantities. How many are you going to sell of whatever products or services it is? And then let Excel take care of the math and compute the dollar amounts and the applicable cost of goods sold. It doesn't have to be a GL budget by revenue the way that we typically see it in the past with GP. So we capture our revenues. Again, this is the form that's included as part of Quick Start. And then, usually what's the biggest part of it is our other expenses. And other expenses is, again, just allowing us to type in the value. So again, I run this for one company, for one department, for a specific budget year. And this one has reporting components in it too. As I mentioned, that it is a budget form. It's just a report with budgeting components in it. But you'll see from left to right, if I go over here, I've got my actuals, and I've run this for September. So I've got my actuals through September. I've got my last year's budget or forecast to give me a full 12 months for the last 3 months to get me a total 12-month look at what I did last year or what I'm projected to do. And then at this point, I could just come in here and start typing in values. So if I'm the manager that's responsible for this department, I've got some data that I can use to help me determine what I'm going to do this year. And I can just start typing in values. And we also have some other tools associated with trying to determine these numbers. And that's called drill down spreading and line item details or drill down. So if I expand this button down here that's spreading and line item details, you'll see that I can make up and I'll just make this a little bit bigger. So I'm looking at the consulting line, and what this allows me to do is actually put a schedule together for how I'm determining what my consulting costs are for the year. And I can do this using line item details. So if I know I'm implementing BC and Solver, and I've got some costs that I'm going to have for that each month, and then I've got other projects going on. So I can capture these in individual lines and to have a schedule that adds up to this total amount up here So I can see those underlying details, and these underlying details are reportable. So I can, not only can I put the line item amounts in here, but I can also put comments, like, why I did something the way that I did, or how I came up with those numbers. And so all of this is fully reportable. I also have the ability to do spreading. So I can say, just put in a fixed amount and have it spread evenly, or I can have it spread how the number was spread in previous years. So it will look at prior years and see the distribution of the total amount, and it will spread it that way automatically. What that allows me to do is pull things like, I can say, well, just put in what I used last year, 2021, and increase by 5%. Or 4% or whatever it is. So this spreading and line item details just gives me additional scheduled data on how I came up with my budgeting numbers. Okay, so just a few examples of budgeting. We've got lots and lots of forms that are available as quick start. Again, those are all available out in the marketplace too. So in the marketplace, you will see not only reports, but you'll see budgeting templates as well. And there's a ton of them out here, and you can see what those look like in advance. And these are all included as part of Quick Start. All right, so that's budgeting kind of. And the one thing I'd also point out about budgeting is it's not just general ledger. Other examples that we use for it, there's one called strategies and goals. Maybe I just want to capture some of the things that we want to do this year. What's our purpose? What's our values? What's our strengths and weaknesses? What are some goals that we have? How many employees do we want to have? How much cash do we want to have at year end? How much net income do we want to have? How many customers do we want to have? So it's not limited to just general ledger detail. It's basically anything that you want to capture. And as I already mentioned, to be able to capture explanations of variances, that's a budgeting process that allows you to capture, why things happen throughout the year, and all of those things are fully reportable. Now, one of the most powerful things about budgeting is our workflow. So I'm just going to open up a quick workflow on this so you can see kind of how this looks. But essentially what happens is I can route this from person to person. If I've got one or more budget forms, I can route it to the various people who are going to be part of it. I can determine what parameters we're going to run it for, so my budget users don't have to worry about what parameters they select when they run the budget report, or I can hit the checkbox and let them decide which parameters. And I select which forms and what users, and this will just route it to the various people who are part of this budgeting process. I have a completed assignment out here. For example, if I'm looking at a 2022 budget, I've got an assumptions and I got personnel. So there's two of them that I looked at, plus I have one that's completed that's other expenses. So essentially each of these three were assigned to me. Simply go in and enter my budget data, and then I send it up to approval, and it routes it to the next person line. There's two layers of approval. There's a reviewer approval and then a final approver. And so it has the full workflow. I can send it back if things aren't completed. I can change things. Won't get into the full life cycle of workflow, but just know that we have the ability to manage the entire process. So you can see, looking at this, for each of these budget cycle processes, I can look and see where we're at with it. When did it start? Is it open or not? How much are we done? And I can look at all the details too, as who did what, when, and where. Finally, and I won't talk about this much, if you have more questions on this, I can get into it another time, but budget flow. So basically what budget flow allows us to do is link budget forms together. So we've kind of already looked at this. We've looked at those assumptions, for example, that had our FICA, FUTA, workers' comp rates. Those amounts flow through to our personnel budget, because I showed you how those are calculated there. And there's components in our personnel budget that may flow into another budget. So input flow is basically how we can link budget forms together, which helps us to say, well, I can't complete my personnel budget until I know what my FICA, FUTA rates are, for example. And so it just kind of organizes that process, so it won't let me start the next one until the previous one's completed. And again, just a way to help organize that process. Okay, so that's a quick overview on budgeting. A couple other things that I want to show really quick on the data warehouse side. Essentially what happens is we deploy BC integrations. I'm not going to get into a lot of details here, but there are some integrations that run behind the scenes that bring your BC data into the Solver data warehouse. It's nothing that you have to do. It's based on a schedule that you choose, so we can have it just run nightly. We can have midday refreshes, and it also has the ability for you to refresh on demand. So every time you were to refresh the data warehouse, it would go out and update it with the most recent BC data. Those integrations all happen automatically as part of the quick start. So I point that out just to know that you guys don't actually have to do any types of integrations. It will happen automatically. And there's just a series of integrations that run automatically. You don't have to touch them. I also point out that there are lots of other things that we can connect to natively. We don't have to, build custom integrations for everything. So, for example, if you want to connect to other data sources, like a perfect example is if you're going from GP to BC, we can automatically load all of your BC data directly into Solver. But we don't necessarily need to bring over all your GP data. We just need your beginning balances from GP, because we have the ability to bring your GP data directly into the Solver data warehouse. So there's no sense, going through that cleaning process and to load all that history into BC. And again, I'm talking general ledger. We can load it directly into the data warehouse, so you'll have all of your GP data, for historical reporting purposes. And there's lots of other things that we can connect to, Salesforce, we can connect to, other systems, anything that's SQL, we can connect to it. Even things like Google Analytics, if you have a web presence. So lots of pre-built integrations, as well as the fact that we can add more. Last couple of points I want to talk about. There's something called the Solver Academy. You can purchase licenses for this. I think when you do the BC Quick Start implementation, it comes with one Academy user license, and you could add more. And essentially what this is a virtual academy. So there's tons and tons of white papers and user guides and videos and training courses. So you can go through, full learning paths, and it's broken down by function. So for example, you have an administrator path that you can go through. You can go through a reporting path, or a planning, which is budgeting path. Also, learn more about the data warehouse and doing integrations. And then there's a Power BI path. So lots and lots of learning opportunities here in the Solver Academy. There's also a community section in here. So you can post questions to other Solver users. And, they do a very good job of getting back to it. Maybe somebody from Solver that answers your questions. That may be other Solver users. And it's a great place to just go out and ask questions, ask how are you doing certain things, or how you're solving certain problems. And the community in it is pretty active. There is a full support page that is you log into, and you can get answer support questions or file support questions. I already mentioned the showcase, so lots of examples out there. And then the last thing I want to point out is Power BI. So with the Quick Start, you get some Power BI content as well. And I know this is really more related to reporting, but the analytical game, the end game, is kind of heading towards analytics using tools like Power BI. And since BC is on the Microsoft platform, as is Solver, as is Power BI, so they're all basically on the same platform. And so this is a sample Power BI template that was built off of some of those reports that I showed you. So for example, if we want to look at a revenue variance analysis, this is a specific page of the Power BI dashboard that, specific to revenues. Again, this would be all of your data, because it's just pulling from the data warehouse, and it has both tabular as well as graphical representations of your data. We'll see it for, expenses. You can see it for, based on profit margins. You've got KPIs, for example. If we look at, back to the beginning, so some of those KPIs that I showed you in Excel, those are available via Power BI as well. And these are all live data sets. So as you launch Power BI, it's refreshing the data, I think 8 times a day. And so a fairly live data. It's 8 times a day, but you do have the ability to refresh on demand if you are a Power BI Pro user. So anyway, there is some pre-built content out here that can get you started in the Power BI world if you're not already there. And these work in addition to your financial reports, not instead of. So you've got your standard financial statements, your GAAP financial statements, but you also have these analytical tools out here through Power BI. So anyway, Power BI is fully compatible with Solver, as is BC. So it's kind of all one platform, and they all talk to each other very well. So those are the basic components of Solver. You got reporting, you got budgeting, and then you've got your data warehouse and analytics, and they all fit very, very nicely together. So that is Solver in a fairly quick nutshell. Do we have any questions, Allie?
Thank you so much, Joel. That was awesome. It doesn't look like any questions came through, but like I said, it is being recorded. So if anyone gets the recording and has a few questions pop up while they're rewatching it, feel free to send myself or Joel an email, and we will definitely get that answered for you.